Morning, everyone, and welcome to First Take. I'm Carrie Champion in studio with Skip Bayless. Stephen A. Smith is in Charlotte. Is there an exclusive interview happening there?
No exclusive interview. Well, you know, I'm giving a speech tonight at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. And you know why that is, Skip Bayless? Because Stevie A love the kids.
Oh.
He sure does.
Oh.
He sure does.
Yeah.
I thought you were there because you think this is going to be Michael Jordan's year, right? His team's going to go deep in the playoffs this year?
Well, I don't know about that, but they were in the playoffs last year, and my man MJ deserves a lot of credit for the resurrection. Well, he is the GOAT, the greatest of all time.
Because you've covered him for a long time, and you guys are good friends.
Yeah,
you just covered them.
Oh.
You just covered them.
Right.
You know, I don't know if you truly appreciated them.
Okay. As you do. As you do.
Yeah.
All right, listen, gentlemen, a lot to talk about on the show today. Another accusation of child abuse for Adrian Peterson. So what does this mean as the team says they expect he will play on Sunday? Plus, Goodell makes a major change in the NFL's handling of the field, off-the-field issues. But first, let's talk about Nick Foles and the Eagles. They orchestrated another second-half comeback. At 2-0, they are the first team in the NFL history to win their first two games of a season after trailing by at least 14 points in the second half in both games. Foles threw a touchdown to tie the game with 3 minutes left, and then the Eagles ran the clock down to 3 seconds and kicked the game-winning field goal. So last night we watched the game. It was a tale of two halves, first half and second half. But Stephen A. will ask you this. Which do you believe were the real Eagles?
To believe it or not, Skip Bayless, I'm of the mindset that the real Eagles are the team that we saw in the second half of both games, the opener against Jacksonville and last night's game. Obviously, they give a little bit too much in a game last night against Indianapolis. Indianapolis shocked them a little bit. They went heavy with the two tight end set, running the ball exceptionally well, accumulating over 100 yards on the ground in the first half, which is something that appears to be the antithesis of who they are and what they represent. Trent Richardson and Amar Bradshaw, they're not guys that are considered elusive. They're rough riders. They try to run in between tackles, even though Trent Richardson needs to do that a bit more successfully, with more continuity. But there's no question that when you look at them, you don't see a Shady McCoy. You don't see a Darren Sproles. You don't see an Adrian Peterson. You don't see guys like that on the Indianapolis Colts running the football. Primarily, it's usually about Andrew Luck, but I think they shocked the Philadelphia Eagles a little bit in the first half in that 17-6 lead because they were running the ball effectively. They essentially took the ball out of Andrew Luck's hands because they was running the ball so well because you had your two tight end set and the Eagles had to adjust to a heavier, more physical lineup that the Indianapolis Colts threw out there. So they go into halftime. They make the necessary adjustments. They force a turnover in terms of a fumble by Richardson. They force an interception, even though the receiver, Hilton, was held. There's no doubt about that, but you got to find a way to work yourself through that. But in the end, what I watched the Eagles do offensively is something that I think they could do against anybody. Nick Foles hasn't been that impressive, Skip, over the first two games of this season. But if you're going to dip and dunk it to a Darren Sproles who's going to accumulate more than about 152 receiving yards, when you've got Shady McCoy, who's the closest thing we've seen to Barry Sanders in quite some times in terms of his elusivity, I don't think there's any question that when you look at those two weapons and what they're capable of doing simply by Chip Kelly getting Nick Foles to dip and dunk the ball to one of those two. Remember, we're not even taking the Riley Coopers, the Jeremy Maclins, the Brent Sellecks, the Zach Ertz into consideration. And Zach Ertz had a couple of good catches. You're talking about Sproles and Shady McCoy being the primary weapons. And when you have those two guys so close to the quarterback, Skip, where you can dip or dunk it to one of those individuals, it spreads the field for the receivers because the safeties, the cornerbacks, everybody, the cornerback has to stay at home and cover his receivers. The safeties can't just go deep with the receivers. They got to stay at home to some degree because of what Sproles and Shady McCoy are capable of doing, and it can really be just something that's devastating for a defense to deal with. I think those are the true Philadelphia Eagles, and as a result of that, I think the Eagles are far more formidable in the NFC than I even thought they were. I picked them to win the NFC East, and I've seen nothing to derail that kind of thinking. I think what you've seen in the second half of the last two games, those are the Philadelphia Eagles more so than what we've seen in the first half.
By the way, you did watch my Dallas Cowboys yesterday, correct? As I recall. On yesterday's show, you said, "Boy, you're more impressed than you thought you'd be with the Dallas defense." Just a thought.
Yeah, but that's because I thought they were garbage.
All right.
Now I realize they're not garbage. That don't make them better than the Eagles.
I'm still not sure what to make of your Philadelphia Eagles. I'm not sure about the quality of the opposition just yet. I'm not sure about the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm still not sure about an Indy defense without a Robert Mathis to rush the passer. So I do have to give you this. I thought they would miss Deshaun Jackson. Darren Sproles looks like he's about 7 years younger than he was a year ago. Remember, he played in a playoff game at the end of last year at Philly for the New Orleans Saints. Remember that game, Stephen A?
Yes.
And I barely remember it because I don't remember much about him running 4 times for 29 yards and catching 4 passes for 31 yards. Last night, he looked like he was playing on tape that was running in fast motion while everybody else on the field was on tape running at regular speed, normal speed. He was absolutely electric last night, and all of a sudden, we have Foles to Sproles. Foles to Sproles. And I'm sure we're going to hear about that all week because it's like the equivalent, as you know, Stephen A., of little long handoffs, just little quick flips to Darren Sproles, and Chip Kelly puts him in the most advantageous positions in the formation for him to slip free and be gone, man. And he was flying up and down the football field. I thought Indy did a reasonable job on LaShawn last night. He wound up with 20 rushes for 79 yards, but he had one run of 21 yards. So if you do the math on the 19 other carries, he only averaged 3.1. And how many times last night did it seem like LaShawn got thrown for a loss? So good job there, Indy, but you put so much focus and attention on stopping LaShawn McCoy, as you say, the closest thing to Barry Sanders. I'm not sure about that, but I'll leave that be for right now. But all of a sudden, Sproles is just killing you. You're not ready for just how electric Sproles has become, because last week against Jacksonville, he got loose for that 71-yard run for a touchdown that got them going in the second half. So if he keeps that up, he's 31 years of age. This is his 9th year in the league. San Diego finally let him go as a free agent, and New Orleans did finally, because he became an unhappy camper. They traded him for a 5th-round pick to Philadelphia. So is he going to keep up this pace? Because he's the difference maker right now. As you said, Foles is hit and miss. I'm never quite sure what to make of him. He wound up with a QBR of 66.5, which is just a little above average. But still, this little guy, this little mighty might, I mean, that's unstoppability to me. So I'm going to have to give it up to you for right now.
Well, Skip, I think the thing that we have to monitor is that I don't expect him to continue to put up those kind of numbers because I expect teams to respect the legitimate threat that he is and to make the Riley Coopers, the Jeremy Maclins, the Brent Sellecks, the Zach Ertz of the world beat them. What they're going to do is suffocate the line of scrimmage to some degree, or they're going to dare Nick Foles to show you that he can be what he was last year en route to throwing 27 touchdowns and just 2 interceptions. I think it's one of those situations where you look at those guys and you look at the kind of threat that they could pose deep, and you're going to say, I'm going to take my chances against those guys because this guy, Sproles, along with Shady McCoy, are really devastating to us because they move the chains. And what happens is they not only are capable of scoring, but they're capable of eating away at a defense. As opposed to giving up a big play here or there, you've got the defense literally exhausted come the fourth quarter because these dudes are moving the chains first down after first down after first down because of the way they eat up at you. And I think teams are going to sit there and say, well, we've got to pick our poison. We'll take our chances against the Maclins, the Coopers, the Ertz, the Brent Sellecks of the world rather than dealing with Shady McCoy and Darren Sproles.
Okay. So in 2 weeks, they have to go to San Francisco. Then later they go to Arizona. They do have to play at Houston. Houston's no pushover at home this year.
No, they're not.
They do have to go to that little town in sort of north-central Texas.
You've been there before?
I used to live there for just a couple of years. And then they got Seattle coming to Philadelphia. So we're going to find out a lot more about Philly going forward. Not sure about the quality of the opposition yet.
All right. Well, they said after the game, they being LaShawn McCoy said, without Sproles, we couldn't have got it done.
Nope.
It's definitely needed.
Yep.
To the other side, Andrew Luck, who was 20 of 34, 472 yards with 3 touchdowns, lost back-to-back games for the first time in his NFL career. Luck and the Colts poised to win the game, but Luck threw a pick with 5 minutes left in the game. Eagles didn't capitalize until the Colts were called for a questionable horse collar tackle, giving Eagles new downs and new life and a game-tying score.
Had the opportunities, didn't take advantage of them. When you're up on a good team, you better stay up, and you can't turn the ball over in the red zone when you can about to make it a 2-score game. It was stupid. It stinks. It's not good. And realize, it's not the end of the season by any means. And our minds are now, all right, on to the next one, whoever that is, and we know we've got to get in the win column and get moving in the right direction.
Okay, so he said it was stupid and it stinks. He's taking a lot of the responsibility, but how responsible is Luck for the loss? Skip Bayless.
Stephen A. Smith, I think very responsible. Before I get to my points here, let's deal with the 2 controversial plays, if you will. Let's talk about what Kerry just talked about. The interception. Obviously, it's 3rd and 9 at the 22. You are in field goal range with 5 minutes to go in the game. And Brandon Boykin does get his hands on T.Y. Hilton. Now, it was within the 5-yard zone, so it was legal to touch him. I can't really tell if he throws him down. I know Pagano was saying he got tackled. Maybe the left hand grabs the back of little T.Y. I think he's 175 pounds. But as he tries to reverse cut and almost back cut, he loses his balance and goes down. Here's my point about the throw. It looked like Malcolm Jenkins had read it like a comic book. He was breaking hard on the football already. Are we sure that would have been an easy completion? I'm not. I'm sorry. I thought it was ill-advised to even throw at all. And our Indianapolis reporter for ESPN.com, Mike Wells, good guy, good writer, suggested maybe you shouldn't have been throwing it all there because you could have kicked a field goal that would have put you up 10 at that point with about 5 minutes to go in the game. So I'm not sure about was it blatant interference or grabbing and throwing. I guess I'll throw a flag on that one. But again, I thought it was an ill-advised throw to start with that Malcolm Jenkins would have eaten up anyway, even if there hadn't been any contact. What's your thought on that one?
Well, my thought on that one is that I believe that I don't think he would have been open, Skip.
Yeah.
But I think he would have been in the pathway of Malcolm Jenkins to prohibit the interception.
Okay, that's fair.
To deny the interception. So I'm thinking that, it might have been an incomplete pass. It might have been no gain. It might have been something along those lines. What it would not have been in all likelihood is an interception giving the Philadelphia Eagles the ball in a position to tie the game. That's what it would not have been.
Okay, all right, fine. Okay, now let's go to the horse collar. I've been reading the rule this morning, and the way it's too long to read, it would take too much of our time, but I ask all of our viewers, if you want, go look up this horse collar rule and tell me that it doesn't say that any grabbing of the backside of the jersey and yanking down to where the ball carrier's knees buckle, anything like that it is a foul, says the rule. So he did grab jersey up by LaShawn McCoy's name and yanked down, and that's, by the definition that I'm reading here, that's a horse collar. You don't have to grab around the back of the shoulder pads to pull down. Any pulling down is termed a horse collar as I read the rule. So I'm not going to get real worked up about that one. Your thoughts?
Well, I'm not. I'm going to get worked up enough about it from the standpoint that it gave the Eagles a first down and allowed them to continue that drive, Skip. And I think it's one of those situations where when you hear NFL aficionados alluding to it backing the back, grabbing the back of the neck and yanking you down, and that's the interpretation of the rule with everybody, then clearly that didn't appear to be applicable in this particular situation. And when these are altering the games or jeopardizing or interfering rather with the outcome of the game, I find it to be relatively problematic. That's just me.
All right, fine. Now let's go to the nitty-gritty here. 3:25 left in the game. Andrew Luck and company get the football back, 1st and 10 at their 20-yard line, and they go Trent Richardson, and then on 3rd and 5 from the 25, Luck then throws incomplete to Reggie Wayne. And people say, I know our Trent Dilfer, Steve Young said after the game, hey, what the heck, man? You put the ball in your best player's hands. And I'm going to ask this again, Stephen A. I keep waiting to see. I'm never saying that Andrew Luck is a bust. God forbid. He's obviously not a bust. But the premature coronation of Andrew Luck continues to drive me nuts, because I keep waiting for the breakout game, the signature game, the big stage, Monday Night Football game. And last night he goes 20 for 34 for 172 yards. And if you recall, if we could see this real quickly, in the middle of the third quarter, he throws one in the red zone into the end zone that Bradley Fletcher he hits him right in the hands. The Eagles corner hits him right in the hands, and he dropped it. Well, everybody just gives him a pass for that. So we give him a pass for even last year, Stephen A. I keep bringing it up, but against Kansas City at home in a playoff game, Luck threw them into a very deep hole than he then threw them out of. But he threw 3 interceptions. And then at Foxborough in the next playoff game, he threw 4 interceptions. Is it possible that Pep Hamilton, the coordinator last night, 1st and 10 at the 20 late in the game, is saying, I don't know if I want to put the ball in the hands of my quarterback. Pep was his coordinator at Stanford. I know they're close, but maybe they decided this isn't the best spot for our best player to have the ball in his hands. That's what it looked like to me.
Is that a rhetorical question, or do you want an answer?
I want your answer.
Let me tell you something right now. I think that when you have to take into consideration, Skip, 2 things that Andrew Luck has been working with or against from the moment he arrived in the NFL. A weak offensive line and virtually no running game. Now, obviously, that wasn't the case last night because they accumulated 101 yards on the ground in the first half. But nevertheless, when you look at the Indianapolis Colts, that's the M.O. The M.O. was put the ball in Andrew Luck's hands and Andrew Luck take us there. And so as a result, you call it a premature coronation. I don't find that to be the case. I told you from day one, Andrew Luck should have been the #1 overall pick, regardless of how great RG3 was in his rookie year. I said to you that chances are, no matter what Andrew Luck is lacking, he's going to be able to be what RG3 is because he has deceptive athleticism. He can scramble out of the pocket, but he's got tree trunks for legs. He can stand in the pocket. He can make every throw. His IQ is off the charts. He has these abilities, and over the long haul, he's going to be more durable. If you go back to a couple of years ago, that's exactly what I talked about. I looked at RG3, even though his upside was greater. I talked about those slim legs. I talked about his relatively slim frame, and I said it's going to be a problem for him. You look at Andrew Luck in Indy, you have no offensive line. You've got Trent Richardson, who came over from Cleveland.
Offensive line.
They're not that great.
Bad. They projected him very well last night. Go ahead.
They're not that great. And you know they're not that great, and they haven't been that great. That's all I'm trying to say. But my point is that because protection has been a constant issue with Andrew Luck, and you combine that with people being able to stack the line of scrimmage because they know they have no running game whatsoever, then you've got a big-time problem. He's been dealing with that. And as a result, they've gone to the playoffs twice with an 11-4 record, 11-5 record. I'm just looking at Andrew Luck, and I'm saying, you're Pep Hamilton. I understand that last night was an aberration, particularly in the first half. But when money time arrives, I listened to Chris Carter, who agreed with you, Skip. I listened to Matt Golick, who agreed with you, Skip. I respectfully disagree with all 3 of y'all, and I'm rolling with Trent Dilfer when he says after the game last night, this is your best player. This is the star of the team. This is your quarterback. You are driving. You tied 27-27. This is your time. Take us there. That's how I look at it. I'm going down with my best. I'm not handing the ball to Trent Richardson or Ahmad Bradshaw over giving the ball to Andrew Luck. I'm not doing that. That's just me.
Okay, big picture again. I keep hearing that Andrew Luck is going to win Super Bowls plural. He's a lock, first ballot Hall of Famer. And now we're in year 3, and I'm saying, just show me a little more, a little more.
But then, hold on.
I can't see it.
That is so incredibly unfair to Andrew Luck. Here's why, Skip.
Incredibly unfair.
The point, yeah, it is,
all he
because
gets
listen,
is a pass.
When he doesn't get a pass. We're just recognizing and appreciating the abilities that he showcases. He makes mistakes. Peyton Manning, Troy Aikman, and a bunch of other players made mistakes younger in their career. When Tom Brady came in, he won, but then he won 3 Super Bowls in 4 years, and then after that, he hasn't won in the last decade.
All right.
And he's been riding the wave of those Super Bowl championships
but he
for
did win
10
those.
years ago.
Yeah, okay.
He won those. Is football not the ultimate team sport? Quarterback can't win by himself. Skip, come on, man.
You got to have one. You got to have some quarterback
They don't have one?
play.
The Indianapolis Colts don't have a quarterback?
No, what I'm saying is, if we look hard at this, because we've set his bar very high, thanks to you and many others who loved him coming out.
I stand by it.
Okay.
I stand by it.
Second most turnovers in all of football as a rookie. Second only to butt fumble man Mark Sanchez. Remember that?
I remember. Thanksgiving.
Okay, going back 2 years ago. Then last year, how much of a pass did he get for throwing 7 interceptions in 2 playoff games? Most quarterbacks, you'd say, what is he doing? Nope, sorry. And let me throw one last thing out. Another reason I feel like he gets a pass, I hear this over and over again. The NFL needs more Andrew Lucks right now. I get that. He is a fine young man. He's as fine as you will ever find coming down the pike, and the NFL needs more Lucks. I don't care. I'm just talking about him playing quarterback. I give you the off the field. I'm talking only about on the field.
Well, actually, Skip, that's not true. You're not being honest, because you do care. And the reason why you do care is because every time somebody acts up off the field, you're quick to point that out, and rightfully so. So clearly you do care about how people conduct themselves off the field, because you think it could potentially affect how you perform on the field. So you can't sit there and criticize guys who don't do what they're supposed to do off the field, even though I'm right here with you. I'm criticizing them right with you. I'm not leaving you hanging, bro. We're together on that.
No,
but my point is, you can't sit there and do that, but then say it doesn't matter when somebody doesn't make those mistakes off the field. Give Andrew Luck credit for being a consummate professional, for being somebody who deserves to be the face of a franchise, who is all about football and all about winning. And then he goes on the field. When you talk about his 7 interceptions, he got outplayed against New England. He came back from those mistakes to lead them to a 45-44 victory over Kansas City in a divisional playoff game. He's gone to 2 consecutive postseason appearances, 11-5 record. This is his 3rd year in the NFL with a suspect offensive line, with a suspect running game, with an entirely new system, with all the stuff going on with the owner and his problems and everything else. This dude goes out there and by and large performs. I love Andrew Luck. To me, he is going to be big time. He's not there yet, but he is on his way, and I will take the bad with the good, because the good far outweighs the bad. He is worthy of being the #1 overall pick, and he's worthy of the acclaim he gets.
I like Andrew Luck. Can't go to love just yet.
I love him.
But I'm just, my point to you about the off the field is that to a point, I believe he's getting a little bit of a pass because he's such a good young man.
Vikings running back Adrian Peterson already dealing with charges that he injured a 4-year-old son while disciplining him with a switch in May, had a previous accusation against him revealed publicly on Monday. Text messages obtained by KHOU in Houston show an alleged exchange between Peterson and a different son's mother in 2013 in June, when that boy was 4. In the text, Peterson first says the boy hit his head on the car seat, then acknowledges the boy was injured while being disciplined. No charges were filed, but the mother reportedly filed a report with Child Protective Services. A source tells our Adam Schefter that the Vikings were aware of the previous allegation and still made the decision to reinstate Peterson after deactivating him over the weekend. Vikings Vice President and GM Rick Spielman on the decision.
When you look at the photos, the photos are disturbing. I understand that. But to be clear, any matter that's involving the child is very important for this organization. But we also think that it is right for him to go through the process legally. It has nothing to do with him as a football player. It has to do based purely on the facts that we have that have been presented to us.
Peterson's attorney, Rusty Harden, responded with this statement. The allegation of another investigation into Adrian Peterson is simply not true. This is not a new allegation. It's one that is unsubstantiated and was shopped around to authorities in 2 states over a year ago, and nothing came of it. An adult witness adamantly insists Adrian did nothing inappropriate with his son. There is no ongoing or new investigation. Stephen A., within the last 24 hours, this is the new information that has been presented to us. Are you okay with his reinstatement now?
I don't know. I would need to know more. I think we would all need to know more before jumping to any conclusions in this matter. I think it's one of those situations where obviously the welfare and the well-being of a child is involved, and it's something that we should all take very seriously. I don't think, the one thing that I will say is that I don't believe that in situations involving children that the regular mantra applies in terms of being innocent until proven guilty, because a child is considered a relatively defenseless human being in desperate need of all of our assistance. That's the one situation where it almost seems okay to jump to the presumption of guilt in order to protect the interest of the child first, because they are relatively defenseless. So I understand that kind of thinking. I'm not opposed to it, but at the same time, we don't know all the facts this surrounds. We don't know all the details. And to be quite honest with you, I'm incredibly uncomfortable venturing into that realm on a situation so sensitive as this without more facts to lean on.
Stephen A., I'm sorry. The harder I look at this, there's no way the National Football League can allow Adrian Peterson to step onto the football field this Sunday. It's just such a bad look, given certainly in light of this second allegation that came to light. Not sure about it. Again, it went to Child Protective Services. Nothing ever came of it. I don't think it will play significantly in this the current case that's pending. But Stephen A., the league cannot allow this. And I know I'm jumping ahead here, but we're in just a few minutes going to talk about several women who have been elevated in the NFL league office to aid Roger Goodell and company in making these kinds of decisions: domestic violence, child abuse. And I think as a collective whole today, they have to make the decision to intervene and say no to, I'm assuming this one came from the top, from the owner, Ziggy Wilf. And by the way, as Adam Schefter was quick to point out last night on SportsCenter, Ziggy has had his legal problems and issues. You can look those up if you so choose. But Ziggy he was not present yesterday at that news conference, and I wish he had been, because I think the buck has to stop with the owner. I think he had to probably have the last word in that conference call that they had with Spielman and Zimmer, GM and coach, and whoever else was on it. And I'd like to know what his logic was, what his thought process was, especially if they knew of both of these incidents or alleged incidents. So now, on the other side, I'm going to point this up again, and I'm going to do some recommended reading here. Today's USA Today has an in-depth background story on the way Adrian Peterson was raised in Palestine, Texas. Headline: Peterson shaped by whippings. Number one lead-off anecdote here is that in middle school, Adrian Peterson acted up at school, and his father was waiting for him in the parking lot after school and belt whipped him in front of, says the story, about 20 other students. It's pretty humiliating. Okay, that's the way he was raised. Has to be enlightened now, because this is 2014, and even though that's what you knew as a child, we all talked about what we knew as children. You have to wise up. You have to come to grips with the fact that you can't punish when you're angry. They're all, again, we could go on and on, but just keep it in balance. I think in Adrian's heart of hearts, he thought in both these cases he was doing the right thing. I believe that with all my heart. But that still doesn't make it right, and it certainly doesn't let him off the hook. So now the league faces yet another huge image problem here, to the point that Radisson Hotels pulled its limited sponsorship, but its banner hung behind whoever was speaking at that podium at the news conferences, and they said, we're out at least for a while, just to see how this plays out. Maybe they're out for good. But we have to accept that other sponsors, I think they're going to get cold feet today. Maybe that will have impact on Ziggy. But I think it's up to Roger Goodell and his new decision makers,
which we will discuss.
To come down hard here and say, nope, can't do it.
All right.
Well, listen, in the interest of discussing stuff that, you know, folks ain't comfortable discussing, let's be clear about something here. Let's take the obvious aside. We saw the photos of the child that was whipped by Adrian Peterson. It's a 4-year-old son.
Yep.
We all know, in my eyes, that was child abuse.
Sure.
I've been on the record saying that.
Yeah.
In your eyes, you felt the same way. You got whip marks from a switch all over your legs, your arm, your ankles, your back. That's a problem. We understand that. But Skip Bayless, I have an obligation, as do you, to take the thoughts of so many other people into consideration as opposed to just our own. There is nothing to discuss with Ray Rice. You punched your woman and knocked her out in an elevator, and there's video of that. There's nothing to discuss. There's nothing to dispute. On this particular instance with Adrian Peterson, there are discussions and debates nationwide. On my show, on Sirius XM Mad Dog Radio, I had 75% of my callers, black and white, north and south and west and east, talking about, well, this is what happened. I mean, if it were my parents, etc., they'd be in jail right now. I mean, Lord, look, could you imagine what it was like back then? These are the kind of things that they're saying.
Sure.
So obviously, we live in a different age.
We do.
Where that is unacceptable. But my question is, do we know if this act by Adrian Peterson, while we both label it child abuse, do we know, was this continuous? Was this a one-time thing where he sat there and hit his child, believing he was spanking his child, and in all of our eyes spanked him excessively and went beyond the pale? Is this something that was a repeat occurrence? Is the mother going to testify that it's something that happened over and over and over again? Or was it a parent that spanked his child and was done with it, and then it happened one time and this was the result of it? See, with Ray Rice and his fiancee, now wife, there's nothing to discuss.
Well, Stephen A., you bring
with
up
Adrian Peterson as a father.
You're bringing up stuff that we all don't know the answers to, and which makes it so difficult, and why I agree with you when you said you just don't know, because now we're talking about intent or the why, and I think yesterday we all agreed that we didn't believe it was malicious, but with this latest accusation being revealed, we have to ask the question again, is it okay for him to be on the field, regardless of intent?
But to answer Stephen A.'s question, the DA was quoted about the second allegation that just came to light. It looks like this wasn't a one-off, meaning that what's pending right now, maybe there were other cases of this with other kids of Adrian's.
But we don't know that.
We don't know that
as of yet.
We do know that mom took that child when he was 4 to Child Protective, right?
Yeah, we do know that. I don't know.
Let me make one last point here.
Okay.
Because the Vikings' point was, as we keep hearing from other owners, due process.
Okay.
A legal expert is quoted today in USA Today as saying he knows of no state law or federal law that keeps an employer from acting before the legal process plays out. So there's no law of due process for an employer. He can decide what he wants about an employee's future before the legal process plays out.
We know that. We brought that up. If any one of us here at ESPN was accused, we wouldn't be working. Go ahead, Stephen A.
The issue at hand, and see, that's the whole thing. We can say that definitively about Ray Rice. I don't know if we could say that definitively about Adrian Peterson, because when people call up to talk about Adrian Peterson, they're really not talking about him. Ultimately, they bring into focus their own life experiences in terms of parenting. I had parents calling up to my radio show saying, I wish somebody would tell me how to parent how to discipline my child. I don't know what to say about that. I don't know.
Well, he's right. We all talked about the fact that we all got disciplined in ways that probably would not be right today.
They would.
So that's why it's such a tough ask.
Gino calls for the ball, takes the snap, drops back, rolls right, throws a bomb to the end zone for Curley. He's got it, but the play blown dead. They're going to say the Jets called timeout before the snap, and no one heard the whistle.
Prior to the snap, New York called its third
That's
and final timeout.
And Rex doesn't know who called timeout. Wow.
No, I don't know. I mean, I'm just telling you, I didn't call it, but clearly somebody called it. I mean, that was what they had said. So I don't know if Marty called it, Gino called it. I just know that they had blown it dead as a timeout.
I want to make it crystal clear. Everything that goes on offensively is my responsibility, period. So I've got to do a better job of communicating and then trusting Big Gino. I've got to trust Gino to get everything fixed before the 40-second clock. So that's the scenario. I was surprised that the timeout was called.
All right, Jets OC Marty Morningwig saying he was responsible for Sunday's timeout blunder in their loss to the Packers. Stephen A., should he be taking the blame?
He should be taking some of the blame. He made an honest mistake. Marty Morningwig is a respected offensive coordinator. He did a good job with the Eagles for years under Andy Reid. I think that he's doing a relatively decent job with the New York Jets considering what he's had to work with, even though this year the personnel is a bit better. You've got Eric Decker in there. You've got Chris Johnson and Chris Ivory in the backfield. I continue to see an improved development within Geno Smith. I'm not going to knock Marty Morningwig too much. He made a mistake. He should know better. He's right when he says he's got to trust his quarterback rather than panicking and running down the sidelines to call a timeout that you simply are not allowed to call. He should know better, no question about it, and he let Rex Ryan down. But it's just an honest mistake. He fessed up to it. It's just nobody's perfect. It's just that simple. To me, the biggest culprit, however, Skip, is the official. I don't care what anybody says. The official knows the rules better than anybody. And just because you hear somebody calling a timeout doesn't mean you're supposed to pay attention to them. You're supposed to turn around and see that it ain't Rex Ryan. And if it ain't Rex Ryan, it doesn't matter. The whistle should not have been blown. The play should have been allowed to continue. And the touchdown should have stood because the timeout should have never been granted. Rex Ryan is the only one on the Jets sideline allowed to call a timeout. Not Sheldon Richardson, who took the blame. Not Marty Morningwig, who took the blame, even though he deserves some of it himself. But the referee is supposed to look and see it's not Rex Ryan. I'm not going to call. I'm not going to freeze that play. And that's what happened in this particular situation. That touchdown pass from Geno Smith to Jeremy Curley should have stood. It was the referee's fault that the play didn't count more than anybody else's.
I hear what you're saying, but I can't buy it about the referee. Remember, his back is to the sidelines, and his primary responsibility, even though he's the guy you have to notify for the timeout, his primary is the ball is about to be snapped, and he's got a whole lot of stuff to watch before his very eyes. So you can't blame him for hearing someone scream over his shoulder. And again, Sheldon Richardson took the blame for it or the fall. Not sure that would apply to the referee. I think he could differentiate that voice from a coach's voice, but I'm not sure about that. But in the end, remember, I told you yesterday, even before the show, I blamed Marty Morningwig for this because he's been a head coach and he knows full well only one man has the authority to call that timeout. But yesterday, after the show, I heard something new from Rex Ryan. He admitted to the New York reporters that he was on the defensive headset at that moment, on that channel in his headset. He wasn't on the offensive channel. Now we're back to our old bugaboo when it comes to Rex Ryan, maybe the best defensive coordinator in all football. Is that being a good head coach? I say no, Stephen A., so I have to change my view a little bit here because Rex has to be on the offensive channel when the offense is on the football field. He has to be in control of both sides of the ball because the ultimate responsibility for that quick timeout lays with the head coach. And if he's on the defensive channel getting ready for the next series because all he really cares about is the defense, that's a problem because effectively nobody could have called timeout because the head coach was preoccupied with the wrong side of the ball at a crucial moment in the football game. That's wrong, Stephen A. I'm sorry.
It's wrong. There's only one problem. You, of all people, Mr. Skip Bayless, do not get to say that. You have chided Rex Ryan for years for knowing little to nothing about offense. You, when he said he was going to go back to focusing on the defense and not really pay much attention to the offense, you said, thank God, what took you so long? You didn't want him to have any part to do with it. We sat here and we maligned Rex Ryan on several occasions because he was basically a defensive coordinator disguised as a head coach who really had no business being involved with the offense, and you called him out on that on several occasions over the last few years. You don't get to backtrack now and say he should have been paying attention to the offense when you've been asking him not to for years.
But it's one thing during the week or even in the crucial parts of the game when you're on defense to be the defensive coordinator. Somebody has to be in charge. It's a rudderless ship if you're saying he's just the defensive coordinator and Marty's the offensive coordinator. Somebody has to have the last call, and it has to be Rex. But I get what you're saying. His focus is on defense, but when the offense has the ball, your head coach better be aware of what's going on with the offense.
But Skip, it's not a matter of being aware or unaware. Marty Morningwig is your offensive coordinator. To suspect that he would know to honor a rule as simple as no one gets to call a timeout on the sidelines but the head coach is not a mistake you're anticipating. You're not anticipating that your offensive coordinator, is going to make the faux pas of trying to call a timeout from the sidelines when rules specifically stipulate that you're not allowed to do it. Now, if there's something a bit more complicated, if there's something a bit more cerebral that it entails and it requires leadership, I get where you're coming from. But something as basic as an offensive coordinator knowing you can't call timeouts, only the head coach is allowed to do so, that is not a reason that Rex Ryan should be blamed. Marty Morningwig is an experienced. He is not a novice. He has been in this league associated with this league for decades. He knows the rules backwards and forwards. You do not call a timeout if you are not the head coach because it's not allowed. Simple as that. And he made that mistake. That's on Marty Morningwig. That is not on Rex Ryan.
Okay, I'm going to agree to disagree with that logic, but I'm going to add this point, and I deeply appreciated it coming from Marty Morningweg because I've also been hard over the last year on Geno. And the bottom line to what Marty said to the media yesterday was, I should have trusted my young quarterback because in the end, the young, I think it was Bilal Powell, was on the lined up to the left instead of the right, and Marty was just freaked out because he thought they weren't going to get the playoff in time. But Geno, to his big credit, was poised enough to move the back over to the right side where he belonged for protection purposes, and he still got the snap off ahead of the shot clock. So good for Geno because he executed, as you say, a play that should have stood. But unfortunately, the adults got in the way, right?
The adults got in the way. We agree there.
The NFL has hired 3 female advisors and promoted 1 female executive internally to create a panel to help lead and shape the NFL's policies and programs regarding domestic violence and sexual assault. Take a look. Lisa Friel, a former Manhattan prosecutor who specializes in sexual misconduct and investigations. There's also Jane Randall, co-founder of NoMore.org, a national initiative dedicated to the education of domestic violence and sexual assault. Also, Rita Smith, a leading voice for domestic violence for more than 3 decades. And lastly, Anna Isaacson, who already works for the league as Vice President of Community Affairs, she will now be in charge of social responsibility, in short, getting the word out, making people more aware of domestic violence and sexual assault within the league. This panel put together by Roger Goodell. Stephen A., let me ask you this question. How do you feel this panel will help impact the NFL moving forward?
I think it'll have a profound impact, and I applaud the NFL's decision on this matter in terms of including women into the decision-making process as it pertains to these issues. All of these individuals have background, whether it's dealing with domestic abuse, domestic violence, sexual harassment, etc. They all have some experience in dealing with such matters, and they have a resume to corroborate and substantiate the positions that they now hold within the NFL. And I think that any time you include women into the mix, there's a level of understanding and balance that's brought to the equation that people can obviously say the NFL lacked in these particular instances, whether it's Ray Rice, whether it's Hardy, whether it's McDonald right now, or a litany of other things that have transpired, according to Terry O'Neill, the president for the National Organization of Women, when she highlighted some 50 cases or so that have taken place under Roger Goodell's watch since 2006. So, and I think that one of the things that has to be taken into consideration, Skip, is simply this. We can sit here and try to be as sensitive as we want to be. I myself was raised by 5 women, but the level of sensitivity that I have is always going to pale in comparison to that of a woman, because she knows what she's feeling. She knows what she's enduring. She knows about the trials and tribulations, not just on a physical level, but on an emotional level and beyond, that sometimes some men just don't get well enough. And anytime you have women that are in the mix and in a position of authority and influence and have a voice that's there to remind men of what it is that they have to endure, particularly from an emotional and mental standpoint, I think that's something that's incredibly beneficial to the league, to the world of sports, and it's going to put those athletes in check, because they're going to know that these are women that you're going to have to deal with, that's going to have some say in the event that you mess up. The only thing that I would like, and I don't want to subtract anybody, but the only thing that I would like to add, you've got a league, particularly over the last 2 years, with all of these men being black as it pertains to arrest and what have you involving domestic violence. I would love to have seen a black woman included in that mix, not to add to the 3 that are obviously qualified, along with Mrs. Isaacson. I would have liked to have seen a black woman included in that mix, but that's about it.
Good points all. Ms. Champion, would you like to respond to what Stephen A. said?
It's funny, I like what Stephen A. said. I was actually, Stephen A., moments ago, we were handed a press release. They added another woman to the list, and I was checking to see her background, her ethnicity. From D.C. She was a former advisor to Barack Obama, and so she was at one point Senior Vice President
Hogan.
Public Policy and now Government Affairs. She now is added to the panel. This is what I like about the panel, and I haven't decided how I feel about whether or not there's someone diverse on the panel or not. But what's good about this panel is that we all know that in the league there are women who work in the front office, but for the first time in a long time we're seeing women who make changes, policy, decision makers. And so because they'll be there to affect policy, to make changes, I feel that there's just a different narrative. Whenever you add a woman, and it's not this pro woman, go to the woman, that type of, people feel as if, okay, I don't want to hear a bunch of women complaining about men. It's not that. What I feel this will be something that just changes the narrative. These women are extremely informed, and I know that they have far-reaching resources within the community, and they've been working with domestic violence for years, decades in some cases. So I'm happy to see that they put this panel together, and now we can see some tangible, some palpable change. How do you feel?
I hear everything both of you just said. I'm hesitant to applaud.
Okay.
Remember the day after the big Ray Rice press session that he did, when you were very impressed and you thought it sounded all so great?
I did.
And I just said, time out, not sure about this. Remember when Roger Goodell announced that he was strengthening his domestic violence penalties, punishments. A lot of people stood up and applauded, and yet I saw that language down in the fine print about mitigating circumstances, and I said, hold the phone. Are we sure that actions will speak as loudly as the words?
Yeah.
So then this morning, and we brought her up last week a couple of times, Terry O'Neill, president of the National Organization for Women, was quoted in USA Today. I know I'm giving USA Today a lot of plugs, but they were really good today.
Yeah.
But she was quoted in USA Today today as saying, it's another step in the right direction, but it is way not enough. The statement of adding these women to Terry O'Neill raises more questions than answers. And also the co-founder of Ultraviolet, which is another women's advocacy group, said right now this looks like crisis communication 101. Okay. And it does smack of that a little bit, but you both make great points. If it's real, if they are really going to have a voice, I love the credentials here. I am impressed. You couldn't do much better than you just did in the group you put together, except for the African-American element that Stephen A. brought up, which I much appreciate. We're still not sure about the ethnicity.
No, I was asking our producer to look that up for me.
We'll figure that one out in just a second about the D.C. component here.
Okay.
But the point is, yeah, great steps in the right direction, but after what the commissioner just went through with, did he get the tape that the woman supposedly received and said looks terrible or not, I'm back in my doubting Thomas mode of, can I really trust what the commissioner is saying? I want to see what he does. And he's got a silver platter opportunity right here, right now with Adrian Peterson. Vikings say he will play on Sunday. Will this new decision-making group, if they all have the input that we hope they will have, will they come to a quick conclusion that the league will, I don't know if indefinitely suspend Adrian Peterson, suspend him for several games. I don't know what their choice will be, but I think it will be a very bad look for the National Football League if he steps on the football field on Sunday. Would you agree?
I don't know. The Adrian Peterson, that case is so difficult for me to talk about. It just is. I don't believe his intent was malicious. And again, I don't have children. Far be it for me to tell anybody how to discipline their child. Yes, it was abuse, and we understand that. But you read from the USA Today article, and he's only doing what he knows. That doesn't mean he was right, but he's only doing what he felt what he thought was right.
Past tense, what he knew.
What he knew.
I hope he's starting to know better.
As of now, of course, as of now. Okay. But I look at this panel, and so be it. Let it be window dressing. These women are extremely qualified.
I want to hear. I want to see actions.
You want to see
I don't want to hear words.
Stephen A., any thoughts?
Well, listen. I said it a few hours ago. I'll say it again. If you really want action, I think every major sports league should have women in these positions and with issues pertaining to women, whether it's domestic abuse, domestic violence, sexual assault, etc., take the commissioner out of it and leave the decisions up to those women. Let them make that call. If you have on-field discipline on occasion, whether it's the Troy Vincents of the world or others fining or suspending guys like a Brandon Merriweather for a couple of games where Ryan Clark is going off and he's alluding to how Troy Vincent played in this game, played the game of football, etc., etc., even though he mistakenly alluded to Troy Vincent being soft. That's a subject for another day. The point is you have a former player in the NFL that you put in a decision-making position to affect the eligibility, for lack of a better word, of a professional athlete playing today. Well, why can't you do the same with a woman in that position as it pertains to female issues? If you let the guys know that you're going to have to answer to these women in the event that you find yourself in that situation, how much you want to make a bet that you're going to see a whole bunch of stuff cleaned up real quick on that matter? You can bet the house on it.
Fantasy football's back and DraftKings.com isn't messing around. DraftKings.com is America's favorite one-week fantasy football site where you can win enormous cash prizes every week. Hurry and get free entry into the Millionaire Maker event where first place takes home $1 million. Head to DraftKings.com now and enter promo code FOCUS to play free to become a millionaire. DraftKings.com. Bigger events, bigger winnings, bigger millionaires. Enter FOCUS for free entry now at DraftKings.com. That's DraftKings.com.
For the second straight week, the Eagles erased a big halftime deficit and pulled out a 30-27 win over the Colts on Monday night. Philadelphia is now atop the NFC East at 2-0, and they have the NFL's #1 offense through the first 2 weeks. We welcome our NFL analyst, Jeff Saturday, to the desk. Jeff, you know something about football, right?
A little bit. I hope.
A thing or two.
He knows a lot about Indianapolis football.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
I wonder where we're going. Jeff.
Here we go.
I don't know, Jeff. I'm just here. No kidding. So how big of a threat are the Eagles in the NFC?
Well, I think the Eagles are the best team in the NFC East right now. So you say that's going to be a playoff team, so they're going to have a chance. I question their efficiency in the red zone. You know, offensively, they're ranked 27th right now. You saw them last night. Get down there, struggle to punch it in. That's very important, especially in a high-octane offense where points matter, because you know your defense is going to be on the football field a great deal. You have to give them a lead to play with, right? It's a tough task to not play with a lead with that style of offense. So as you've looked at the way they've done, I thought Shady McCoy said it best yesterday. Without Darren Sproles, this team is in big trouble right now.
Would be.
Because Nick Foles hasn't played great. Didn't throw the ball great last night. Week one didn't. Not that he's causing issues, but he's not playing great. You know, he's just not there. And so teams are surrounding LaShawn McCoy, trying to shut that run game down. Offensive line is banged up. Issues there. So I don't know how far I would put them in the playoffs. I do think they will be a playoff football team.
Stephen A.
When I look at the Eagles, I've got them winning the NFC East, #1. And right now, Skip Bayless, Jeff Saturday, always love you on the show, by the way, buddy. Good seeing you.
Thanks, my man. You too.
I believe that the Eagles may very well end up being the biggest threat to the Seattle Seahawks for NFC supremacy. I'm not willing to say that definitively yet. I still don't want to jump off the Saints bandwagon. I want to give them another week or two. But right now, I'm looking at the Eagles, the potency that they have on offense, their ability to put up numbers in bunches, and I like what I'm seeing. And somehow, some way, if I'm a quarterback, I want to play for Chip Kelly, because he seems to know what to do, what adjustments to make in order to make things happen for the offense. And I just like what I'm seeing from these guys. I don't think they're to be underestimated by any stretch of the imagination, and the adjustments that they've made defensively in the second half of these first 2 games have been incredibly impressive, because it looks like night and day. And what it's showing me, guys, is that Chip Kelly is going into the locker room at halftime, and just like everybody's calling him an offensive genius in terms of putting up points, he's literally figuring out what other teams are doing and finding ways to negate that. And I find that incredibly impressive. It's all about adjustments. I judge coaches by how their teams look from half to half, not just over the course of 60 minutes. Do you sit there and make the necessary adjustments? I think they'll figure out how not to give up 17 points a half in the first half of both games. But are you going to be able to figure out what they're doing? I'm not seeing too many people doing that yet.
So, Stephen A., I'm going to do a huge, crazy leap here, just to put this in perspective. Let's say that Chip Kelly, mostly riding his offense, gets to the NFC Championship game in Seattle. What do you think would happen?
I think that you have to give Seattle the edge because of that home crowd. But what I would caution you about, Skip, is when you have that level of quickness and elusivity with Darren Sproles and LaShawn McCoy, if there were a team that could give them trouble, it's that, because you're not challenging their secondary and the Legion of Boom. The first thing you're doing is causing havoc for that front seven, and I think that could be problematic for Seattle.
You buying that?
Well, the Eagles' offense is predicated on running laterally first. That I think, is problematic when you're facing the Seattle Seahawks.
It is.
The Legion of Boom will not be threatened by their receivers, so there's no fear there. Their tight ends are their two main vertical threats that you're looking to do. Cam Chancellor and Earl Thomas, I think, match up fairly well. They're backers. They can play a good zone. There's a lot of speed on that Seattle team, so I don't necessarily buy in to what Stephen A. is saying right there. And the other point about yesterday, no one ever wants us to talk about the referees. I get that. But they are one play away from being down either 10 or 14. That game goes a completely different direction. Then you get the horse collar thing. I mean, I know there was a bunch of calls at the very end of the game that caused some issues. They found a way to win. I get it. They're 2-0. We move on and move forward. But they didn't just command that Indianapolis team. And the Colts, who have not run the ball effectively, ran it very well last night against that defense.
Okay, for me, what has come to pass after 2 weeks of the NFL season is that there's a huge little X factor now in Philadelphia. He's about 5 feet 5 inches tall.
Yeah.
And I just can't believe that at 31 years of age, Darren Sproles in his 9th NFL season is going to keep doing what he has done in the first 2 games. You know what happens to most running backs, quote unquote, in this league. They don't last this long,
right.
But he's not really a running back. He's a scat back. I don't know what he is. Chip Kelly tried to make him a running back and then admitted sort of facetiously last night, oh, he's a receiver, and the press laughed because they've been all over him about, is he a running back or a receiver?
Right.
Well, in this case, the 31-year-old played 21 years of age last night.
Reborn.
Because you want to talk about electric. Nobody will remember this but me because I'm an Oklahoma fan, but in the Big 12 championship game in 2003, my Sooners ran into this little man, and he went for 323 and just blew him off the field, 35-7, and they still got to they were still awarded the national championship game and lost to Nick Saban's LSU, but that's a whole nother story. But my point is, he looked like that guy again last night. He looked like that guy against Jacksonville a week ago. And you're right. They could be 0-2 without this little man. Well, can he keep doing that for the next 14, 15, 16, 17 games? I would say no, because remember, once upon a time, San Diego finally said, we'll be okay without him. And then last year, New Orleans finally said he's an unhappy camper. He didn't do much in the playoff game when New Orleans went to Philly, remember? Yeah. And they just said, okay, that's enough. We'll dismiss him for a 5th-round draft choice to go to Philly. Boom. Well, I thought they were going to miss Deshaun. They don't miss Deshaun because of little Sproles. Folds to Sproles.
Well, you look at Sproles, his career, I looked at him this morning, 5.1 yards a carry running the football and 9.1 receiving.
In his career?
In his career.
That's crazy.
Sick numbers.
Yeah.
So this guy does it wherever he is. And I was on the bad end of the San Diego when he takes when we're playing with the Colts at home and he's running. This little guy can get it done, and he is explosive, and he plays explosive football.
All right.
Well,
Stephen A., weigh in.
No, I wanted to respond to what Jeff said earlier in terms of disagreeing with me. Of course, you know more football than me, so I'm certainly not going to refute what you're saying. I guess for me, what I would ask you is, if you look at San Francisco with a Vernon Davis, if you look at New Orleans with the Jimmy Graham, if you look at Denver with the Marius and Julius Thomas, with Wes Welker out there, et cetera, we've seen teams that had big receivers. We've seen teams who've relied on their receivers, who've relied on their tight ends, that got completely obliterated by the Seattle Seahawks. I'm thinking along the lines of, have you ever had to deal with the threat of the combination of a LaShawn McCoy and a Darren Sproles that you could dip and dunk it to?
Right.
Have you ever had to deal with that? Even if you had some receivers, we know what the Philadelphia Eagles receivers aren't capable of doing, but so much against Seattle if they're the primary focus. But if you have to be distracted by a Sproles and a LaShawn McCoy, my thinking was that distraction is what could open up the field for those other guys to do damage, which is why the Eagles would be a threat. What do you say to that?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of. You're just talking about pure matchups. If we can get a matchup, two quick scat backs out of the backfield, you can let Seelick and Ertz stretch you vertically, and then let the receivers kind of try to shake and bake outside when has to be or has to happen, and try to get Foles rolling out. It's possible. Yeah, I like that. We got a little more football to watch before I'll go on, but I like your idea.
It looked like the Colts were heading for their first win of the season last night, but 2 late turnovers, including an Andrew Luck interception, allowed the Eagles to steal a win in Indy. Luck and the Colts are now 0-2, which allows us to bring back our ongoing debate. Does it allow us to do that? Our ongoing debate of the Colts' former quarterback and their current signal caller. Did the Colts make the right move choosing Andrew Luck over Peyton Manning? The floor is yours.
Floor is mine.
Yes.
Well, now qualify yourself.
We know.
Well, come on.
Yeah, I played with Peyton for 13 years. I wish he would have retired as a Colt. Career would have ended there 100%. I mean, that guy completely changed a city, a community from racing and basketball to a football town. Lucas Oil was built on what he did. So that's out there. There's no doubt. Organizationally, I think they had to make the decision they did at the time they did. $25 million, don't know where his health is, got the first pick of the draft. What are we going to do? How are we going to evaluate this? And honestly, I think it's a bit unfair to Andrew Luck at this point in his career to try to compare him to what Peyton Manning has done in Denver. True. Right? You go out to Denver, you're stacked. You know, John Elway he's backing up the Brinks truck. He's bringing everything in. Andrew Luck has played with a mediocre offensive line at times. He has zero run game. Defense hasn't been fantastic for him. So I think if he's not the first, he's one of the top most hit quarterbacks in the NFL over his first 2 years. And in spite of that, he has won 11 games each year, won a playoff game, gone to the playoffs twice. Guy's a great leader. He is welcomed in that locker room and in that organization. People love him. The people that I know that would never have talked about what a class act this guy truly is and how his leadership is infectious, his humility, the way that he carries himself in that locker room, the level of accountability he puts on himself. So Colts long term, they did what they felt was in the best interest of their football team. Now, you look at Peyton Manning on the other side. I mean, MVP, what can you say? The guy, 55 touchdowns, throws the ball over the field, takes your team to the Super Bowl. His numbers are you can't argue what a great quarterback he really is. So I think where Jim Irsay made his decision, I don't know that I would have made the same decision.
Thank you.
However,
he hasn't even said it yet.
Hold on. I don't know that I would have made because I am a fan of Peyton. I mean, he's a friend, but I am a fan of the way he worked. Like, I know how that guy worked. I didn't have any doubt he would come back. I mean, even when he had doubt, I didn't doubt. So, but that was me, and me seeing him practice, me seeing him do all those things. So for me, I would have loved to see him retire in the horseshoe because that's all I knew. But both have moved on and done fantastic in what they're doing. So I'm going to be as PC as possible to end it up
this
right
is one
there.
of the great PC tap dances I've ever heard.
I have to be.
Stephen A., do you want to chime in before I jump in?
Jump on you, unfortunately.
Jeff Saturday, perhaps is a rhetorical question, perhaps it is not. Quick question for you before I make my point.
Okay.
Do you pick Peyton Manning for 3 years, or do you pick Andrew Luck for 15 to 20?
You're talking about just a long-term value.
Yes.
Yeah. For organization, Irsay had to make the decision he made. Right.
All I'm trying to say to you, Jeff, is don't fall victim to that to that slickster next to you who just sits there and tries to change the narrative any chance he gets. Jeff Saturday, Stephen A. Smith, nobody with sense about the sport of the NFL is remotely trying to imply that Andrew Luck was, is, or even will ever be a better quarterback than Peyton Manning has been over his illustrious career. The question has always been, if you are the Indianapolis Colts, blessed with the #1 overall pick, do you take a franchise quarterback who in all likelihood will be around for the next 15 to 20 years, or do you shove him aside to keep a future Hall of Famer who's won a Super Bowl ring for you, who's fresh off of 4 neck surgeries. You don't know about his health. And, oh, by the way, even if he is healthy, the likelihood is that he's going to give you 5 years before he walks into the sunset and call it a day. That's the narrative. Skip Bayless tries to change it into something else every chance he gets because he tries to sit there and fake our positions to elevate his own. But in the end, that's what it comes down to. Andrew Luck, 11-5 over the last 2 seasons. Rookie year, 4,300 yards passing, threw 18 interceptions and 23 touchdowns, only completed 54% of his passes. His second year, he throws for nearly 4,000 yards. He cuts his interceptions in half from 18 to 9. He elevates his completion percentage from 54 to 60. The growth, the maturation, the leadership is clearly apparent. And, oh, this is en route to being sacked 73 times in 2 years. Suspect offensive line. No running game worth speaking about. This is Andrew Luck. You want to talk about keeping Peyton Manning in Indianapolis? You want to keep him there with that offensive line? Absent a running game? You really want to do that with him coming off of those neck surgeries, being in his mid-30s? You go right ahead. The Indianapolis Colts went the young route. They went with the youth movement. And last time I checked, Peyton Manning went home the same time they did 2 years ago. And, oh, by the way, he played an additional week or 2 after Andrew Luck. That's it. Andrew Luck's been in the postseason, too. That's all I got to say.
That's it.
That's it.
Drop the mic. Your turn.
He's done.
Wait. Are we still on?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know. I fell asleep. I'm sorry. I didn't. Oh, what's the question? Oh, we're talking about Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck. Here's the real narrative, Mr. Saturday. Help me out here. 2 years ago, last year, this year, next year, which of these 2 quarterbacks would have given the Indianapolis Colts the better chance to win a Super Bowl? 2 years ago, last year, this year, next year. I believe it would be, without a shadow of a doubt, the guy who's in Denver right now, the guy that you know all too well, because I made a mistake, and I first guessed this before the owner in Indianapolis pushed Peyton out the back door, because he pushed him out the back door. Here, let me pat you on the head, and it's been a nice... You wanted to see him finish in Indy, so did I. And I first guessed it by saying Peyton Manning will go to Denver and make the Pro Bowl the next 3 years. I undersold that. He is an MVP candidate. I think he should have been 2 years ago. He was last year. I'm pretty sure he's going to win it this year. That's just me, and I'm not going to write him off for a year from now, because he looks like he is energized, revitalized once again, driven, and playing at a supremely high level. So all I'm asking is, and I first guessed it, this is not jumping on the bandwagon on the back end. I drove it from the start. I said, no, Mr. Irsay, you're making a huge mistake. You have to keep the franchise. The house that Peyton built, Lucas Oil, has to have Peyton Manning for the next 3 or 4 years. I don't care about Andrew Luck. And so far, and this is a whole nother argument, the bar got set very high because I was told he's going to win Super Bowls, plural, and he's going to win many MVPs and be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I have not seen that yet. I think there has been some premature coronation of Andrew Luck, who has not quite lived up to that. And he failed, this silver-tongued devil that I'm looking at right here in the,
well,
the monitor.
A devil.
He failed. He's not a devil. He's not.
It's all right.
He's my devil.
My father
devil.
My father calls me that. I mean, it's all out of love.
But he is
no
silver-tongued. He's got that silver tongue. But the point is that, listen, Andrew Luck, like a lot of rookies, his first year in this league, he was second in the NFL in total turnovers. And last year in the playoffs, I'm going to bring it up one more time because people are giving him a pass. Yep. He threw 7 postseason interceptions in 2 games. Not 4 or 5, 7. 3 and 4 at Foxborough. Okay, I'm sorry. Peyton would have given you a better chance to win it all. I'm not saying he would have won it all, but hey, wouldn't you have liked to see your friend in Indy for 4 more years?
I definitely would have.
Yeah.
Stephen did bring up a good point, though.
He did?
With the offensive line the way it was, or the way it is now,
yeah,
it would have been a big, difficult situation to do. He would have gotten hit a ton. But this is my.
Well, he gets rid of it quick.
No, you're right. You're right. But as far as giving you the best chance to win, that's where I say it's an unfair comparison when you're talking about the two. Peyton Manning in his 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th year is always going to give you a better chance to win than any first, second, third, fourth year quarterback. That's just the bottom line. He's the best quarterback in the game for a reason. And like you said, MVP, best player in the game last year and arguably the year before.
Sure.
If you look at the way he plays, the command of the game, the command of the offense, he would have given you a better chance. I think when Irsay made the decision, he had thrown away the idea they were going to compete for a Super Bowl. I think, honestly, he thought we're going to rebuild. We're going to rebuild around Andrew Luck, and in 4 or 5 years, we'll begin to put push the pedal down. I think that was the decision he made for an organization. I think he understood that this was not going to be a team that could compete for that Super Bowl right away just because of the changing of the guard, per se.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, he did not answer the question.
I told you, in my heart, I wanted Peyton to be a Colt till he walked away, beyond a shadow of a doubt. If that was my team, if I was writing the checks, I would have done it.
Stephen A. with the
But
the fact is that Irsay was rebuilding.
That's right.
Which means that Andrew Luck has them ahead of schedule.
Silence.
Well, I got to add.
You defend.
Here's what happened. The Colts doctors decided Peyton was so damaged goods he wasn't worth the risk. That's what happened, and Peyton's doctors convinced the other teams, starting with the Denver Broncos, he is worth the risk.
Well, then stop blaming the Colts.
Well, okay.
Jeff Saturday, it's good to have you
that
on
was
a
fun.
Tuesday. Maybe we'll see you another day. That was corny. I thought I'd say that, though. Thanks for being here. The Hawks announced last Friday that General Manager Danny Ferry is taking an indefinite leave of absence following his racially charged comments about Luol Deng. CEO Steve Koonin sent a letter to fans apologizing for the events of the past week on Saturday. Carmelo spoke out on the topic Saturday morning and slammed the franchise. As a player, as an athlete, we're looking for a job. We're trying to find a place where we can move our family, we can make our family comfortable, where we can be comfortable in a comfortable environment. But those comments right there, we would never look at. I'm speaking on behalf of all athletes. We would never look at a situation like that. I don't care what it is. All right. Stephen A., what is expected from the fallout of the Hawks situation?
Well, I think what you can expect ultimately is Danny Ferry to depart from the Atlanta Hawks organization. CEO and co-owner Steve Koonin has been incredibly supportive of him, although he embraced Danny Ferry taking a leave of absence. In the end, no matter what heat he's trying to ward off, you're going to see the locals in Atlanta make enough noise to force his ouster. I think one of the things, Skip, that's not being mentioned enough is that there's an agenda that's taking place, and I'm not opposed to the agenda, just how it's being handled. You clearly have black civil rights activists and others that are in Atlanta that are really, really making a push for minority ownership. They want Barry Levinson, who is on the way out because of the sensitive email that was exposed from him dating back a couple of years ago. He's about to sell his ownership stake, which the commissioner of the NBA, Adam Silver, supports. And as a result, you've got folks down there in Atlanta that want black ownership, and you have folks throughout this nation that are in support of more minority representation within the ownership group, the NBA's Board of Governors, because at this particular moment in time, the only black face from an ownership perspective associated with an NBA franchise happens to be that of Michael Jordan and no one else. You've got an individual like Junior Bridgman. He comes to mind. He owns a Wendy's chain. He's worth over $600 million, and he's been pursuing ownership for an NBA franchise for quite some time. In the foreseeable future, we don't know whether expansion is going to take place, and if it is going to take place, it's perceived or it's thought to be in Europe as opposed to another team in the States, say Seattle getting a franchise or Louisville or somebody like that. And so as a result of that, you have some people within the black community that's concerned because you want another black owner within professional sports, particularly the NBA. Having said all of that, I'm still alarmed at this stuff with Danny Ferry. And rather than using my words, again, I think he needs to go because he made a mistake and the locals are not going to support him. I do not think he should go because he's a racist. I think he made a mistake, and I don't view him as a racist. And I have a problem with people who's trying to label him that way. But before I give it to you, Skip, I'd like to read you something. This is from Dr. Harry Edwards. You know who that is. He sent me an email over the weekend. And the email talked about for that man's job to be threatened over that incident is outrageous. Listen to these words, Skip. If we are going to relegate people to the ranks of the unemployed and unemployable because they say stupid / unfortunate / poorly stated things, there are some dark days ahead. With the alternative media feeding this frenzy, with millions of hits in the social media firing and fueling the frenzy, and with the mainstream media legitimizing the frenzy, we are degenerating into, quote, an electronic lynch mob. That is my concern. These are the kind of things that we need to guard against. And I think in the case of Danny Ferry, I agree and stand with the commissioner of the NBA by simply saying he made a mistake by reading what he read on the scouting report. But it was on the scouting report. He shouldn't be labeled a racist and he shouldn't lose his job. But nevertheless, that doesn't mean he should be in Atlanta. He still should have a career in the NBA as an executive. And if he doesn't, it shouldn't be because of this.
I'm not sure I'm with you on this one. I thought J.A. Adonde wrote a great piece for ESPN.com over the weekend in which he basically said the NBA needs to get to the bottom of this. That's basically what I said last week. I'm so uncomfortable with how comfortable Danny Ferry was reading this what I think is a racist reference. He's got some African in him.
And that's not a bad thing, is what he said.
But why the racial identification to make this point? I don't know what African had to do with this. So that's so inflammatory. I don't think that requires lynch mob mentality to get to the bottom of. I just think we need to get to the bottom. So if I'm understanding Danny Ferry's position correctly, he says that those words came from a member of another organization in the NBA, and that he was just quoting that man from that organization. I don't know anything about which organization. I assume it would have to be one for which Luau played.
Cleveland. That's what I'm hearing.
You're hearing Cleveland because it could be the Bulls or it could be Cleveland, okay?
I'm hearing Cleveland.
All right. So I would like to know if, in fact, that quote came from someone in Cleveland's hierarchy. Is it possible they were Danny's words? It could have been Danny Ferry's words. I don't know that. He says they were other words. I just don't think we should give him a pass, Stephen A., for that reference because it was really way out of bounds.
Skip Bayless, if you don't mind, I'd like to add this. I'm not giving him a pass. I understand that that's not something he should have read. I understand that in all likelihood it's going to cost him his job. I understand that in the climate that exists within Atlanta, I have been on the record saying he needs to go. He has to go. What I'm saying is he has to go because he made a mistake that the locals are not going to forgive him for. He shouldn't be universally labeled a racist because he made that mistake. Because here's the problem. As a black person, we got to stop acting like other folks make mistakes, but we don't. If you open that Pandora's box where Danny Ferry has to go, you got black players. You've got black coaches. You've got black executives. I'm sorry. What's going to be opened with your Pandora box? What I'm saying is I want to make sure that I leave some wiggle room for people from my community, from other minority communities as a whole. If we make that mistake, we can stand up and ask for forgiveness and somebody can be receptive to that. But when we're so dogmatic in our approach to be so quick to get rid of somebody because they made a mistake, you are now closing the door on the wiggle room that you may need someday in order to get compassion and forgiveness from somebody else. That's my issue.
Okay.
Well said. But what do you think?
I hear you. I do hear you. But you said in the climate in Atlanta. See, I would like to think that this should be an issue in the climate in San Antonio and Los Angeles and Portland and Chicago and any other NBA city.
Well,
I get it, but I know what you mean. I just think, let's not just say, oh, just because it's in Atlanta, this is wrong.
But I only said that because Barry Levinson and them pointed out that 54% of Atlanta is black, 70% of his audience is black, 90% of the patrons in the club is black. That's the only reason I brought up Atlanta in that context.
I'm with you. Okay. Tricky issue, but Danny Ferry on indefinite leave, but you think he's out.
Oh, he can't come back to Atlanta.
All right.
I just don't think he should be prohibited from ever being an executive because of this.
We've had a lot of tricky issues today, fellas.
Just trying to, stay in a good place. Like Deshaun was saying, just, our spirits are high. We're always thinking positive. So we'll see what happens tomorrow and whatever information comes out and know whatever the timetable is from there. But, right now, kind of just focused on Philly, trying to do what I can to help this team win and help Kirk and Colt go out there and be prepared to play football. I believe, and I know a lot of people believe, that Kirk is going to go out there and play extremely well, and this team is going to win games because we have a very good team that's on that field. So one guy doesn't define this team. That includes me.
RG3 reacting after an MRI showed that he had a dislocated left ankle, no fracture. So what's your take on what he had to say, Bayless?
Stephen A. Smith, as perhaps Robert's biggest fan in the media, I'm about to be way too hard on RG3. It is highly possible that he was just happy yesterday for, as Kerry just pointed out, the fact that his ankle was not broken. But I will submit to you, it's still dislocated, and it's a long, painful process to get back, and I will be very surprised if he returns before this season is over. Maybe December, but probably not. My take last night was he seemed so happy that, to me, I feared it was relief. He was relieved to be out from under the mounting pressure to be that rookie RG3 again. And it tore me apart, Stephen A., because I wanted to hear angry. I wanted to hear devastated. I wanted to hear crushed that the opportunity to reprove himself got yanked out from under him after a game and whatever it was, a quarter. And I didn't hear that. And it really, really disturbed me.
Skip Bayless, most things about RG3 disturbs you because you love the guy and you root so hard for him and you ordained him that dude that was going to be the class of that draft from a few years back. The fact is, though, I think that you got to pump the brakes with him a little bit because a lot of it is not his fault. He's being asked these questions. Just the other day, you brought up the fact that it's RGIII instead of RG3, too much about himself or whatever. He said it up there, and he's reminding you that it's not about him. It's about the team. He's applauding his teammates. He's showing faith in them, et cetera, and now you find something else to get on him about. I'm not saying that you're wrong because you're being cruel towards him. I'm saying that you love the guy and you root for him too hard, that every little thing about him disappoints you if it doesn't measure up to what you think it's supposed to be because you believe in him that much. He's not healthy. If RG3 were healthy, we would not be having these conversations. If he had never gotten hit and gotten injured by Haloti Ngata, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We're having this conversation because RG3 is I don't want to call him frail, but he's not as durable as you'd like him to be. And that's the bottom line. That's what this is all about.
Stephen A., even Sunday night before he knew he was not fractured, he seemed so sort of at peace. Maybe it's a God thing. I don't know, but
he has been saying that.
I know, but it's just usually a superstar athlete who had that yanked out from under him would be torn apart.
Yeah, but Skip, he might have thought his ankle was broke and he was going to be out for the season. Now he knows there's a possibility that he could come back, plus the team won, plus he doesn't want to come across as somebody that's desperate to come back because he doesn't believe in Kirk Cousins. He can't win. He's not perfect, man, but he doesn't deserve all of this scrutiny right now.
All right, two quick announcements on ESPN Radio. ESPNW presents the State of the NFL with a panel of women, including myself, Jay McManus, and Sarah Spain. So tune in from 9 to 11 p.m. Eastern. Tonight on ESPN Radio. And speaking of radio, Sirius Satellite from what time, Stephen A?
1 to 3 p.m. Mad Dog Sports Radio this afternoon.
All right, we'll see you tomorrow.